So many times we've seen mages be pushed out of their intentional lane and into the support role. It's happened with Brand, it's happened with Xerath, it's happened to my poor Lux, and I'm here today to tell you that there's another mid laner out there that could have the support role by the balls. Literally. Syndra has always been a pretty strong mid laner, in competitive that is. In solo queue, sure, when she first came out back in 2012, Jesus I'm old, she was the cream of the crop for mid laners. But since then, she's struggled a bit there, pretty much hovering around 50% win rate or lower, sometimes much lower. But do you know where Syndra has held above a 50% win rate during her entire career? Well, let's be honest, if you know the channel and you read the thumbnail, it's support. At this moment, Syndra support has over a 53% win rate and is her most successful role by far. And that's largely because of this guy, Nurko Ping, according to Google Translate. It's not just him, there are several high elo Syndra mains in Korea that play her heavily as support, but he is the most prestigious, making his way not only to the top 15 spot in Korea this year, but doing so solely playing Syndra. And while he averages around a 55% win rate overall with her, that shoots up to over 56% in the 200 plus games he's played her as support. But before we unlock all the secrets on how Nurko Ping has made Syndra support look unbeatable, we first have to talk about why she doesn't always get picked first on the dodgeball court. For one, Syndra is immobile, making her easy to dive onto and making positioning super important. Also, all of her basic abilities are skill shots, which if you're newer at the game can make her a difficult champion to first pick up. She's squishy, which now on the durability patch is a bit less of an issue, but nonetheless can be a pretty big problem. And finally, and most importantly, anytime Syndra loses lane, she bawls her eyes out. But even with all of these potential problems, Nurko Ping has found a way to make it work. Level 1 Nurko, like most Korean supports, performs a sweeper swap, which for those unaware is when you place your initial yellow trinket ward down, head back to base before minion spawn, and trade out your yellow trinket for a sweeper trinket instead. This is helpful on Syndra especially because without sight on her when she's in a brush in lane, she can lay on some heavy pressure thanks to her potent stun and potential damage that we'll talk about a bit later. But for now, at level 1, he grabs his Q or Dark Sphere. Syndra's Dark Sphere ability is on a flat 4-second cooldown at all levels. Most other level 1 ability cooldowns are much longer than this, which means that he can be very aggressive early game into most matchups. He easily outdamages most other characters in elongated trades if he can land all of his spheres, proc his electrocute rune, and stay at a safe range. Last season, the mana cost on Syndra's orbs was reduced by 33%, so while you still don't want to be going from all these spell casts, it doesn't feel as bad using your balls as poke throughout the laning phase. The other nice thing about this ability too is that the range is pretty solid and every sphere is AoE, so look for those grouped up targets to get more bang for your buck. Also note that dark spheres have no cast time, so you can be moving around as Syndra while casting this ability and not have to worry about completely stopping and potentially be susceptible to someone diving on you. Syndra support's power comes from her ability to manipulate those dark spheres though, of which our player gets that ability at level 2 when he unlocks his E or Scatter the Weak. Scatter the Weak as support can be used just as a get the fuck off me tool to push divers back. But even as support, the real power from this ability is in the stun. You see, even as mid lane, Syndra plays better with teammates if she's not completely fed, because of her ability to make picks with her QE stun combo, and with support Syndra, it's no different. Nurko is heavily reliant on this combo to make picks for his team, and I'd even go as far as to call him the Madlife of hitting this, predicting where enemies are going to go before launching it off and setting up easy kills. There's multiple reasons why this stun is so strong on a support champion. Unlike other supports we've covered, this stun can go through multiple enemies, meaning it's always a threat even if there's a minion wave, and it can stun multiple enemies as well. It's one of the longest range CC abilities for all supports, being about as far as a Morgana binding, and also since multiple balls can be shot out of the cannon at the same time, that means an even bigger area of effect and chance to stun than every other basic ability in the game. Syndra's spheres from Q, once cast, will last on the field for 6 seconds unless affected by another ability. And if you remember earlier, we talked about how Syndra's cooldown for Q is 4 seconds, meaning that even at level 2, you can knock multiple balls away from you to increase your chance of landing a stun. And do note again that the max range of this ability combo is stupid far when pushing one of your spheres, meaning you can make some unexpected catches across walls while you're harassing down the enemy bot lane, or when you're roaming, catch enemy solo laners off guard with that long range. Sometimes Nurko is also just a complete mad lad and even brings Hex Flash to surprise enemies from even further away, but we'll talk about that later. And let's also revisit that other important statement that I just mentioned of your Dark Spheres extending their lifetime on the field if they're affected by another ability, specifically your W. You can reset how long your balls last on the field. That sounds like a sexual innuendo, but you can reset how long your balls last on the field if you move them with your W or Force of Will. Force of Will is important if you don't want to wait for Q cooldown to reposition your spheres and you need a quick stun, can help you reposition a sphere to increase your likelihood of hitting a stun, or can do some other cheeky things as support like helping to secure a jungle camp, saving a canyon minion from turret and creating a freeze if your ADC is out of lane, or just extending your trade combo. Your basic ability trade combo should look like casting your Q, hitting the intended target if possible, but if not, that's fine, following up with your E, landing your stun and locking the opponent in place, using your W to pick up a ball or enemy minion and then recasting it on that stunned enemy, proccing your electrocute, and finally using another Q as they're running away since it has such a low cooldown. This combo does a lot of damage but requires Nurko and you to be precise in hitting your stun. If you feel less confident in hitting that stun straight up or just want to increase the AoE of your stun, Nurko will instead harass an enemy with his Q, forcing them to start dodging around or reposition, pick up that sphere with his W and hold onto it until right before his Q comes off cooldown again, use his W to reposition that sphere slightly to the side of the opponent, quickly cast another Q directly on top of his opponent, and then finally finish off with his E, knocking both spheres back and stunning the enemy. This makes dodging your stun even harder for opponents because they have two lines that they have to watch out for instead of one. And Nurko sometimes takes this even further, positioning both of his spheres in potential escape lanes for the enemy that he's targeting, so they really have no way to avoid it. Now, knowing all the basics, your early game lane flow should include whittling down your opponents with your Q poke and basic combos we just talked about until someone gets low enough for you and your ADC to jump on. The laning phase is pretty similar to when we covered Vel'Koz support, where you and your ADC are both damage threats. So if the enemies don't have good focused and burst one of you down immediately, your overall DPS in a long fight will be much higher than theirs, and you can almost always come out on top. And even if you find yourself behind in lane, your ridiculously long E range can play really well for jungle ganks, and if you're able to stun both enemy laners at the same time, forget about it. That's just an easy win at that point. Your damage and kill threat of course goes up even more once you hit level 6 and unlock Syndra's ultimate or Unleashed Power. This point and click heavy burst ability makes it so easy to secure kills with your team and ups in how much damage it does depending on how many spheres are present on the field. So using your W to elongate your sphere's lifespan also comes into play when using this ability. And if you're brush camping looking for a kill with your team, you should be casting Qs in preparation on the floor around you to do more damage once that enemy missteps. A full combo with multiple spheres from you can be enough to 100-0 an opponent, even after the durability patch, and enemies who are around half health should respect you when you have your ultimate available, or else. But what you probably thought in your head this whole time is that you'll be playing Syndra support just like you would be as if she was a mid laner, as a burst and control mage. But what you really should be doing is playing her as a pick and utility support. Nurko accentuates this by buying utility focused mythic Everfrost to expand his CC time from his long range stuns from 1.5 seconds to nearly 3, making it even easier in the mid game for his team to follow up on and even easier for him to land multiple Qs on the target. It's pretty similar to when we did the Swain support video, where high elo Swain supports like to favor utility over damage as well. Also similar to that video, Nurko likes to build Rylai's second to not only have even more utility for his team by basically being able to constantly slow opponents with his low cooldowns, but to also make him surprisingly tanky alongside his mythic item choice, which also gives him more health. And that's largely what you'll be doing throughout the mid game, setting your team up with your long and potential multiple instances of CC on enemies, and then help burst them down with your high-powered ultimate. Camping and brush with good vision control can also help you have an effective mid game because just like with other control mages, Syndra functions best in tight corridors like the jungle. And once team fights roll around, you'll largely be fitting into the same function as earlier, staying somewhat far back and attempting to both whittle down opponents with your poke and catch important enemies off guard with your combos before using your ultimate to turn the team fight into a 4v5. One other thing Nico likes to do pretty much exclusively in team fight settings if the enemies are grouped up is use his ultimate on an important carry first after setting up a few spheres, and then once all of his ultimate balls are on the floor, using his E to make a huge AoE stun play, potentially stunning everyone on the enemy team and giving his team some time to do unmitigated DPS, ultimately winning the team fight. For his build, he starts every game with a Spell Thief's Edge. From there, he'll rush his level 2 boots, most typically getting Sork Shoes against squishier teams, or Boots of Lucidity against tankier teams. After that, he'll typically grab his mythic item, Everfrost, and most commonly after that, build a Rylai's or other flexible items depending on the enemy team comp, like Azonia's against Heavy Burst or Assassins, Morellonomicon against Heavy Healing, Shadow Flame against teams with a lot of shields, or Void Staff against teams with a lot of MR. If the game goes long or he needs some more oomph in his build, he'll buy an Elixir of Sorcery, and throughout the whole game, like a good sport does, he's buying control wards and maybe a wardstone if the game goes very late. For his runes, he brings Electrocute for more combo damage, Cheap Shot for even more damage, Zombie Ward to stack more AP, and Treasure Hunter to hit item power spikes faster. For his secondary page, sometimes he likes to wild out and take this Hex Flash page like we talked about earlier, but more commonly, he's bringing this page, which brings both Bone Plating for better trade potential and Unflinching for some tenacity. Regardless of his secondary page, he always brings 2 Adaptive Force and either Armor or Magic Resist depending on his lane opponents. Syndra support works well with ADCs with CC like Jhin or Jinx, or ADCs with dashes that can catch up to her long CC range like Ezreal or Lucian. Syndra support struggles against hook supports like Thresh or Blitz, or ADCs that can negate her stuns like Sivir or Samira. If you guys liked this video, I heavily suggest you go check out last week's video, which was our 10,000 subscribers special where we did a parody song on the box with Thresh. See you guys next time. Peace.